I'm Noah Abrams, and welcome to The Days Between, the show where I talk to my friends, people I admire, and people I want to better understand about success, failure, happiness, and misery, as well as all the other elements that make up a life well lived. Along the way, we'll look at mental, spiritual, and physical health, and when life didn't go as planned, the steps they took to get themselves from A to B and beyond. This week, I am speaking with Zach Skow, founder of Marley's Mutts and the Positive Change program. I first became aware of Zach through Positive Change Instagram page, and admittedly, I had some preconceived notions about the incarcerated. But after watching their videos and stories, as well as having experienced the transformational healing nature of dogs in my own life through my 2 rescues, I quickly found my perspective changing and really saw the power in the work they were doing, not only to change the lives of those participating in the program, but also to shift societal perceptions as a whole. As you'll hear in our conversation, Positive Change is about much more than photo ops and Instagram posts, and regardless of where you land on the greater issue of incarceration and how we as a society view as well as treat people who have served time in prison, it's impossible to deny that they are making a very positive impact on a very underserved segment of society. And that's not even taking into account the residual effect the program has had on the participants' families, as well as race relations within the prison walls. And all of this work is made possible through private donations, as incredibly, they get no federal or state funding. Zach's personal journey is equally as powerful as the work he's doing with Positive Change, but I'll let you hear it in his own words. So with that, here's Zach Skow on The Days Between. So I'm here in Los Angeles, California, with Zach Skow, president and founder and head dude for Marley's Mutts.
I'll take it.
Positive Change program. You're from Los Angeles, yes?
I'm from Hermosa Beach, man. I'm from like 15 minutes south of here.
Born and raised?
Born and raised, 37 9th Street. I am a South Bay kid for life.
You still have family down there?
I do. Yeah, my twin brother lives down there. My best friends live down there. They're just more grown-up versions of themselves. Still living in the South Bay, but just doing cooler things, you know?
Tell me a story about growing up in the South Bay.
The South Bay was a very interesting place to grow up. It's the most ideal way to grow up. I mean, we lived in a house with another family. That's the only way we could afford to live down there. Both broken homes, so both moms that were the head of their family. So we lived in a home with my mom and kids, and then this other woman, Sue, and her kids. And we were raised by the beach, man. You know, mom didn't come home till like 8 or 8:30 p.m. Mom left super early in the morning. So we had surf class in the morning, school, and then we come home and hang out at the house, surf, skate, do all that stuff all day until 7 or 8 p.m. Have to get dinner ready, and then mom would come home. So back then it was the greatest thing in the world. We were raised off surfing, skateboarding, punk rock, and just being with your friends.
Any dogs at the house growing up?
All the time, man. Yeah, we rescued our first dog from school. I'm walking back from Hermosa Valley School when we were little kids, and it was in the middle of a storm. And we found this dog next to a storm drain, just kind of huddled up. It was pouring down rain, and my mom came to pick us up and called her dad and said, "Hey, Dad, can we, Mom won't let us keep it, but will you let us keep him?" And he did. And so that was our family dog. His name was Speck. We had him forever. I had other dogs at my mom's house too. And yeah, always had dogs, always a dog and a skateboard all the time.
It's a good combination.
It is for sure, man.
So tell me about high school.
It's hard not to talk about high school without talking about being afraid of girls. I was a pretty popular kid, but I was deathly afraid of women because of things I'd been through as a kid that I didn't really realize then, overcoming sexual abuse as a kid. And so I had this nagging anxiety about girls all the time, all the positive anxiety about girls, but then also this really negative anxiety about girls. So I remember that being a big part of my youth, was not understanding why I was so uncomfortable around women. Fast forward, it really accelerated my drinking and drugging career, because I needed to be comfortable around women. I needed to be, and the only time I felt aware enough to be myself is when I was intoxicated. It's the only time I felt like the anxiety and the nerves would subside enough to have a conversation as if I was messed up. And it wasn't until many years later that I was able to kind of understand how that sexual abuse affected my life as a maturing teenager. It was one of the beautiful things about therapy, but it kind of went away. I still have certain anxieties and they'll perk up and I'll get triggered. But for the most part, the process of therapy, really miraculously processed that out of me. I thought it was something I was going to live with forever. And it was one of those things that when I got sober and stopped drinking, I really got nervous about, because there's nothing changed. I still couldn't be around women in an intimate scenario without being terrified.
And you mentioned the substance abuse. At the time, were you conscious that you were consuming more than other people, or was it just sort of in line with everyone else?
I knew from the very beginning that I was an alcoholic, if I'm honest. Like, I knew the minute I drank for the first time. And the minute I did, the first time I drank, I remember it, I was 9 or 10 and drank probably half a bottle of my mom's wine. She was having a dinner party. And I just remember feeling how I thought I was supposed to feel, There were a lot of expectations of me. My mom and I actually had to talk about this recently, where I was never a kid. I was always my brother's big brother, even though we're twins, and I was always my mom's kind of best friend. And that required me to grow up very quickly. I also remember the first time I went to a party and drank like a 40, by my Old English 40. And I just remember thinking, this is how I want to feel. I remember coming home, being pretty dizzy. We got in a fight that night. But I also talked to this girl, Megan, who I'd always wanted to talk to, right? Like, I never had the courage to talk to her. I think I was 14 or 15. And I just remember thinking that night, I remember laying up in my bed, even though I was spinning, I just remember thinking, this is where I need to go, where I need to be, because I felt more like myself. The voices kind of quieted, the frustration, the anxiety wasn't there. I could talk to girls and I could fight without being nervous, right? Like, I know that sounds ridiculous just to say, but that was very comforting to me. I felt like I could fit in that way. I felt like I could be who everyone was expecting me to be,
Were you able to function as far as like classes and sports and whatnot?
To a degree. When I got into a lot of weed, it fell off. I could do it when I was drinking, because I was just drinking usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I didn't become an everyday drinker until college. So as soon as college started, I was an everyday drinker.
But what does that mean exactly?
So, to answer your question, in high school, I could function because I was really just drinking, on the weekends. It didn't get in the way of things that much. But when I started to smoke and do psychedelics and stuff, we'd do that during the day, and during school, so that threw things off a lot. So end of my junior year and my senior year were very much compromised. Luckily I'd gotten a good SAT score. I think my SAT score was like 1220 or 1280, something like that. And I had enough AP classes from early on in my career that I could get into school. But then I got kicked out of San Diego State after the first year. It was very obvious that once I went to college, I committed everything to using drugs, dealing drugs, and consuming alcohol. That was what my focus was.
What was your relationship with your parents like at this point?
My relationship with my parents has always been great, but they went through all the disappointments of a kid that failed out of college and who was developing very serious substance abuse problems,
It was clear at that point that there was a problem.
I was pretty, it was really difficult at the time to know. My mom wasn't in the state. She had moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and she was an alcoholic. So my mom, I'm sure she had an idea of what was happening, but was pretty disconnected. My dad knew for sure. I think my dad's always struggled with the classification that I am an alcoholic, because his dad was an alcoholic and died of liver failure when he was 15. So my dad's entire life was marred by that term alcoholic and what alcoholism does to you. My dad's dad was not in his life. And when he was, he beat my grandmother. When he was, he beat them. When he was, he brought suffering and torture to that household. He was a word, a name. His name was Kermit. And we never brought his name. We didn't talk about him. When we did, my dad would noticeably shift. It was just not a topic that we brought him up. He died when my dad was 15. That was the end of the story. We didn't really talk about it. It wasn't until I got sick, of the same disease of alcoholic liver failure that I started to learn about him and kind of figure out who he was and what he was and how he played such a critical role in my life. And then he also played a critical role in my sobriety, which is strange to say, but very true.
So you failed out of San Diego State after the first year.
I did.
Did you come back into the South Bay?
I did. came back to the South Bay briefly. I knew I couldn't stay here. Things were not, it's just not a good place to stay if you know that you're falling into these patterns. So I did a geographic move to Arizona to be with my brother. So I packed up shop and went to go be with my twin brother, and he's living at a fraternity, and my dad, supported the move so that I could be out there with him, and figured my brother and his friend group would kind of help steer me in the right direction. And it didn't. I was doing hard drugs and selling hard drugs within 6 months that I was there, and it got bad. At that point, I was drinking a handle of Jack Daniels a day, and, we were into crack cocaine, and, you start getting into selling drugs so that you can do drugs. It was just a very dangerous, very unfortunate time. I look back on those times and I can't even believe it was me. Some of those scenarios we were in, some of the positions that I put myself in as a rational thinking human being are just unfathomable to me, unfathomable. Some of the things that when I went through the steps, in recovery and had to come to grips with were really impossible to rectify. Like, I've been harmed a lot, but I've also harmed a lot of people, and having to reflect on that time and some of the harm that was caused was something that really had to be worked out psychologically through the steps and kind of freeing you of that. You don't know how much stuff is buried inside of you that you've done until you start to, unpack it. And I had such a deep self-loathing for myself, deep self-loathing. And talking about some of these things and just setting them free really kind of helped me not hold on to that extreme self-hatred. I really needed a way to let go of some of those things, because most of those things that I did, I couldn't even tell anybody. I couldn't tell anybody at all. I mean, they were not legal and shameful and embarrassing, all of those things. I didn't even, it's kind of funny, but when my sponsor was a cop. So when I went through my inventory to come to grips with a lot of these things, I didn't even feel like I could tell him. So I just bullshitted and gave him a part of my inventory. And then I played peekaboo with it. Like, I kind of throw out a piece of it and see how he'd react. Cause I didn't know if he had like a responsibility as a cop, to like report me, or I don't know. You just get nervous and paranoid about how those things work. But he was very, very accepting. And he told me some stories about what happened while he was on the job as a detective. And once he shared all those things, I was like, all right, this is great. I'll come clean. I'll really share what's on my heart, and get it off my chest. And it was beautiful. I think normal people should work the steps, man. I think normal people should work the steps like every 6 months. There's a level of freedom and a level of self-acceptance that comes with processing all this stuff that's built up in your life, man. And we don't, right now, especially like in our culture, we're so focused on judging people for their transgressions. We want to point our fingers at you and judge you. And so it can be a very hard time to admit something, to come clean, to free yourself of something. It can be very challenging, but not within the context of the program. It's incredible. It's just a great way to free yourself, and to be accountable, and to get on a path to giving a shit about yourself.
Well, how did you go from these dark moments in Arizona to being in the program and being focused on cleaning yourself up?
Oh man, not the easy way. That is for sure. I took the most difficult road possible. If my liver had not have failed when I was 28, then I would not be sober. I would have just died 100%. So I went into, to answer your question, the way I got introduced to sobriety was my liver failed. I went into full end-stage liver disease. It was a very long process of complete delusion. I started to turn yellow, my eyes, my skin. I started to swell up in my belly. Like, I started to look pregnant. I started to get bruised, like bruises all over me. I started to vomit blood. All these things started to happen to me, and I go to the doctor finally, and they come back the next day. They call me in to go over my results, and they're like, you are in liver failure. You need to go to a hospital immediately. And I was like, what? And part of me knew that I was having some issue related to alcoholism, to drinking. But I went out in the parking lot and I told my dad, he drove me to that appointment. I told him, we're good. Just no hard alcohol. Just drink red wine with food. We're fine. I just got to watch myself. Meanwhile, I'd just been told that I was dying. Like, they said, you are dying. You are in full liver failure. You need to go admit yourself into a hospital right now. And I completely lied.
Was that denial or was that shame?
It wasn't shame. It wasn't denial either. It was preservation of alcoholism. It was, I knew that meant alcohol had to go, that I could no longer have alcohol and drugs. That's what was killing me. And if you take that away, I might as well not exist. I mean, in the most fundamental way, if you remove alcohol and drugs from me, I might as well not exist, because I can't. I can't sleep. I can't talk to people. I can't get these voices to be quiet. I can't function. I cannot function. If life slows down and my mental chatter catches up with me and I don't have enough alcohol or drugs to silence it or to distract me, then I will be suicidal, first and foremost. It's just all of those things, man. There was no me without alcohol and drugs, period. And I felt that every second of every day, I mean, my drinking routine in the end was box of wine a day. So like whatever that is, 8 bottles or something. And it was a full solo cup at 2:00 in the morning when I'd wake up, a full solo cup at 5 in the morning when I'd wake up just to go back to sleep, a full solo cup in the shower at 7:38 whenever I got up, and then every 2 hours for the rest of the day. I would just chug it, fill a cup up with whatever kind of wine I could get, or anything, and just, drink it, not to really become shit-faced. It was just to maintain, just to try to be a version of myself that was presentable and digestible and like wasn't racked with anxiety or tormented by fear. I was tormented by fear of people, places, things, myself, my past, mixed in shame, all that stuff. When you have a career of alcoholism, you just build up all these things that your mind is constantly reminding you of, all of your deficiencies, all of the things you've done wrong, all that stuff. And I didn't know how to shut it down. The only thing that worked for me was alcohol and drugs. And you're going to take that away from me? Where does that leave me? Seriously, where does that leave me? So yeah, instead of go to the hospital, I just stayed home, and I wore long sleeved shirts, baggy clothes. So my belly button herniated not long after that. So I got this belly button sticking out, so I would just tape it. I would every morning tape my belly button so that it wouldn't stick out through my shirt. Wear long sleeve shirt so you couldn't see the yellow and all the bruising. I'd wear sunglasses so you couldn't see my eyes. And I'd just sit out in the sun so I wouldn't look so yellow. I would look like a orangish brown. And I did that for another month or month and a half until I started bleeding so badly that I couldn't hide it anymore. It was like, it became very evident that I was dying of liver failure, and that if something didn't happen, I was going to die at home. So when my dad finally took me down to check me in, that was it. We went to the hospital and they checked me in for extended care, and I was there for almost 6 weeks. And it was a very scary, surreal experience to be hospitalized at 28 years old with end-stage liver disease. Because the first thing they tell you is you will not survive without a liver transplant, and you're not going to get a liver transplant. That's the first thing they said, is you need 6 months of sobriety just to qualify for a transplant, and you're not going to make it 90 days. So this is where we are. So you can stay here. We'll try to take care of you. We'll try to do blood transfusions. We'll try to give you frozen plasma transfusions so we can get in and actually do a biopsy and all these different things. We will help medicate your pain levels here. We'll help regulate your pain levels here, all that good stuff. But you're most likely not going to survive because we can't even give you a liver transplant. That hospital that I was at in Bakersfield didn't even do liver transplants. There was only 7 hospitals in the state of California that did liver transplant. So that was it, and I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. Got addicted to Dilaudid immediately when I got there. I went through alcohol withdrawal in the hospital. I don't remember any of that. So for 2 or 3 days, I was also in kidney failure. So I really don't remember anything about the first 3 days, or very, very little. They stabilized my kidneys, bunch of blood transfusions. Those I do remember because it was just so cold. And then they just ask you your pain level. They show you a chart on the wall, and it's got a smiley face. It's super happy. It's got a middle of the road face. It's got a frowny face. And then there's a frowny face that's like crying its eyes out, right? If you point at the crying frowny face, they give you the corresponding amount of drugs. So why would you point at anything else? I got through alcohol withdrawal. The point of that is I got through alcohol withdrawal, and they immediately fill you with as much morphine and Dilaudid as your body can take, because their whole approach is pain management, so that's all they care about is the pain level you're in, regardless of how badly it messes you up, so 6 weeks into that, my dad just said, enough is enough. We got to get out of here. We just can't keep you here. You're going to die here. At that point, they just wanted to send me home on hospice care. They didn't want me there anymore anyway. And, we had those very uncomfortable conversations with the doctors about just going home. Your son should be home surrounded by his loved ones where he can be free. At that point, too, I had a person that was assigned to me at the hospital because I was a danger to myself and others. So I had a babysitter at the hospital, was with me all the time. Anytime I went to the bathroom, shower, it was a very, very degrading place to be and a very, very hopeless place to be because you're aware that you're getting sicker while you're there and there's nothing you can really do. Subsequently, I actually got to go back and apologize. And I got to talk to some of the nurses. I got to show them that I was alive. This was like 2 or 3 years later, which was incredible, But yeah, so what ended up kind of being the real pinnacle, the moment of truth was, my mom was not really involved in much of this. She was fighting her own alcoholic demons and she wasn't living in the state. But my dad's an aeronautical engineer. My dad, he's an engineer. You give him a problem, he's going to solve the problem, come hell or high water. If he's got to work it out with a pencil and graph paper he's going to figure it out. And he figured it out, man. And he got me a meeting with the comprehensive transplant team at Cedars-Sinai, which is where I was born. And they said, all right, you have a meeting with the transplant team. If you can get down to the hospital on whatever Tuesday, we will review your case. So we pulled everything out of my body, signed me out against doctor's orders. They have to reiterate to you, do you understand what you're doing? You're leaving a medical environment. You're not okay to leave here. But we did it anyway, rushed to Cedars. They interviewed me, looked at my case, and they took me on and said, all right, you're now a comprehensive transplant patient. If you can survive 6 months, we will get you a liver transplant. If you can make it and you can abide by these rules, you can not drink, you can go to meetings every day. I had to fax them my AA schedule that I was going to meetings, my card, which is a whole nother fun story. A lot of people in the program have come in on court cards, where you're required to be there for the court. No, I'm still the only person I know who's on a liver card. Came into the program on a liver transplant card.
At the time, though, was there any sense of hope on your end? I mean, was that the first time that you're like, hey, I may get through this?
That's a really good question, man. The truth of it is I was completely detached. If my dad hadn't have been the one taking this on, I wouldn't be alive. I had no investment, no agency over my own outcomes. I did not give a shit.
Did you give a shit for your dad because he gave a shit?
That's also a good question. I did, man. And that's the struggle of so many alcoholics and addicts is I cared. I genuinely gave a shit. I just didn't know how to not be me. And I was this very broken, very struggling alcoholic and drug addict. So I knew I was a danger to myself and others. I knew I couldn't be trusted. I knew all those things. So I almost had lost faith in myself. I mean, at that point, I'd let myself down so many times. You do the same. You repeat the same mistakes, the same lunacy, the same insanity, over and over and over again. And you start to wonder, am I even meant to do this? Am I meant to be here? I'm clearly hurting a lot of people. I don't know that I have much value in this world. And back then, especially in the hospital, I would obsess about that. I would obsess about not being alive. And when I got home, I obsessed about it more because I didn't have drugs. Went through opiate withdrawal at the house. That almost killed me. That was a nightmare, just a nightmare to not have medically aided, withdrawal and be that fragile. But yeah, I had lost all hope for sure. My dad never lost hope. My dad always was going to figure it out. I wouldn't even say that he's a chronic optimist. I would just say he's a problem solver. He's your typical male engineer man, where the equation in front of him was his son is dying of liver failure caused by alcoholism and drug addiction. How does he help fix that? And he just did everything he could to do it. And it's kind of pathetic to say that out loud, but it's 100% the truth. I had very little to do with a lot of my outcomes. I took some suggestions at the end that were very important to get me better, to get physically better, to overcome the cirrhosis that kind of ravaged me. I made a lot of life changes and did a lot of things that set me up for success. But prior to my head clearing, I didn't if it were left to my own devices, I would have not survived this 100%.
So did you make it through that 6 months and get a transplant?
I did make it through the 6 months, which was fantastic. It was a very difficult road, but I did not get a liver transplant. So the way the transplant system works is you are assigned a score based on how sick you are. It's called a MELD score, and that's an acronym for Model for End-Stage Liver Disease. And they'll give you a number, and with that number, you are eligible. So basically, if you're like, I think it's 15 or above for any period of time, you are transplant eligible, provided that you haven't drank, that you are following the rules. And my MELD score was almost 30, so I was very qualified. I just didn't meet the sobriety marker. So there was nothing I could do until I got that 6 months. And after about 2 months, I started to get better. I started to have improvement. I was, at that time, I was just walking my dogs. I was just doing anything I could to not take my dad's gun and put it in my mouth. And that was just outside with my dogs, walking on the hills and in the mountains, just in nature, trying to find God in the quiet places, trying to find God in the sky, in my breaths, in anything, just trying to connect with something other than myself, which is what was being encouraged in the program. And I found it, man. I really did. That's when I started to get in touch with my grandfather who'd passed away. Believe it or not, I digress a little bit, but I drank exactly a month after I got out of the hospital. So a month after I got out of the hospital, my dad finally had to go take care of some business. He had to go to Brazil. To Brasilia, the capital. So he left for like 48 hours, which is that means he didn't even, I think he spent one night there. So that's a long flight to Brasilia. And then you turn right back around and come home. And when he left, I found the spare keys to the truck and I went down to the liquor store. And at the time I could barely walk. I don't even know how I drove, much less how they sold alcohol to me. But I got a bunch of wine and not a bunch. I got one bottle. I just wanted to have something to drink at dinner so that I could sleep. It was the first time I'd been alone. I just wanted to turn my brain off, I remember thinking I just wanted to taste it. And I blacked out like immediately. And I don't usually black out. And I came to 2 days later. There was like a whole bunch of bottles around me. I don't know how I got any of them. And my dad was going to be home in like 4 hours. So call him on the phone. He just landed. He's driving home and I clean up all the bottles and I know I'm really sick. Like, my stomach was killing me. There was blood coming out of both ends and I knew I had to go to the hospital and I knew I had to tell him. And so he walked into his office and I went in there and started talking to him. And I just said, "Hey Dad, we got to go to the hospital, And he looked up at me and he said, "What are you talking about?" And I took off my glasses so he could see my eyes. And as soon as he saw my eyes, he could, I said, "Hey, we got to go." I drank again. And he just started to shake his head and he started to weep, like half weep, half angrily respond. And he just couldn't believe what had happened, that I drank again. And he just kept repeating, "You've killed yourself. You've 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 killed yourself. No, I'm not taking you to the hospital. You take your fucking self to the hospital. I'm not taking you to the hospital. You go yourself." And I couldn't drive, So he took me and I think they gave me a shot of dope. I think, I don't really remember a lot of it. And then that was the last time I drank. That was October 12th, 2008. That week, feeling about as low as you can feel, I couldn't tell anyone in the program that I drank. I couldn't tell the transplant program. I couldn't tell anyone because they'd kick me out. And going through my grandmother's stuff. So I'm feeling really sorry for myself going through my grandmother's keepsakes. She'd passed away several years earlier. And I find this book that's sitting right on top of one of these shoe boxes. And it's a 24-hour day book. I knew exactly what it was. It's from the program, from Alcoholics Anonymous. I went, "Holy shit, look at this." And I open it and it's my grandpa's. It's his fucking social security card. Kermit Alden Skow. I go, "Holy shit. No way. This is my grandfather's Alcoholics Anonymous book. Holy shit." Like, I didn't even know I knew he died at a recovery facility trying to get sober in 1961, but I didn't know anything else about that. And here I find I'm at my lowest point. I've just drank. I might have fucked my only chance of getting a liver transplant. And I find this book with my grandfather's social security card in it with another paper in it. So I take it out to the living room where my dad is and I go, "Dad, check this shit out, And I give it to him and it's marked. It's got a ribbon. So it's marked like a placeholder. And he opens it up and he goes, "I'll be damned." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "I'll be damned." I go, "What, man?" He goes, "It's marked July 3rd. I go, "What was July 3rd? He goes, "That's the day the son of a bitch died." So my grandfather was reading this book the day he died, July 3rd, 1961. It's never been opened since. He died of liver failure, the disease that I was suffering from. And in it is his social security card. There's a little piece of paper. I took it to my sponsor. It said 730 Cadillac, and it had some numbers on it. It said Feldman. He goes, "Oh, that's the 730 men's stag meeting on Cadillac Street in Los Angeles." And Friedman was his sponsor. I go, "Holy shit." So all this is being revealed to me. I'm going, "Oh my God, man." And at the time I was such an atheist, such an agnostic, borderline atheist, but it gave me the permission to connect with this dude from my past, this like spirit, who probably left this earth in a very chaotic energy state, and he had no relationship with my dad. And it was the most incredible thing that happened in my sobriety, because I used that connection for the rest of my sobriety. And still, I developed a conscious contact with God because of that. I would sit, I'd read that book every morning. At nighttime, I would go do my breathing exercises outside, and I'd look up at the stars and I'd think about him. And I'd ask, I couldn't, being a fundamentally agnostic person, it was very hard for me to entertain God. But still, I had to put an old white guy face to it for whatever reason. And just thinking about talking to this old dead grandfather of mine made that connection possible. It facilitated this really unique connection, and it's never really left me. So I've learned a lot more about him, and obviously he didn't make it, but I very much consider myself his legacy, that I got to continue in this life. And
did it get you out of that victim mentality?
It did. It did to a degree. Victim mentality is a tough one, man, for us addicts and alcoholics, because it's how we got everything. I think a victim mentality got me what I needed for a very long time. Victim mentality permeates every aspect of your life. It will permeate and pollute every aspect of your life, and you won't even know it. You won't know that it changes how you look at every single day, So not adhering to a victim mentality has taken a ton of work, because I will notice just naturally falling into a victim mentality by virtue of being frustrated or wanting or needing something, because that's how I always got it in the past. So I wouldn't even say I'm cured. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think especially nowadays, a lot of us recognize that if you portray yourself as a victim, you can get a lot of things that you need. You get the attention you need, you get the uniqueness you need, you get the sympathy you need. So yeah, I think the victim mentality requires people in your life that are close enough to you to call you on your bullshit, and just a sense of how tantamount it is to not living your true self. You know what I mean?
So you make it through the 6 months. You don't need a liver transplant. What happens next?
So what happened was, right before I got sick, I was doing a lot of volunteer work for a couple of years with different dog rescues to just make myself come across as someone who wasn't a fuck up. I had nothing going for me, So if I was volunteering for the Humane Society and doing work at Canine Canyon Ranch, I could at least say that. So that's why I was doing it. And I loved working with dogs, and they always gravitated towards me. So when I got sick and I had to occupy my mind with something other than taking my own life, dogs were it. I just started bringing dogs in. And whenever I was focusing on the dogs, I wasn't focusing on the fact that I might die, or the fact that I sucked, or the fact that I had all these fucking self-hatred, or the fact that I'd hurt all these people, or whatever. I felt sorry for myself at all times. So it helped me not feel sorry for myself. And it quickly became this really productive routine. I started adding 1 dog, 2 dogs, 3 dogs, a pack of puppies. So I was starting to surround myself with dogs at all times that needed me. So I was responsible for their care. I was responsible for getting them adopted. I was responsible for their training. I was responsible for their money, meaning they needed money to be alive, and I had to provide it. And that really helped me plug into my purpose and plug into a greater sense of self and a greater sense of why I'm here. I had really felt like the world would be better without me. I mean, genuinely to my core. I'm sorry if I get emotional about it. It's just, there are people that will hear this and will recognize what it feels like to truly not think you're supposed to be here, to have to struggle with the idea that taking your life might be the better course of action for the world. And that's a really heavy, it's a heavy thought to have, and it's a heavy thought to consistently have, to like nag you all the time. So when I started working with dogs, it really helped me pivot away from feeling sorry for myself, all the bullshit that surrounded that. And it just plugged me into something fundamentally good. And it was inspiring, and I didn't think it was inspiring, but my whole community took notice. Back then it was pre-social media. So I was going into all the businesses. I was still yellow, so who's this yellow guy with a pregnant belly putting up, with rescue dogs, putting up flyers and shit. And they were always funny and inappropriate. I'd make, off the cuff remarks. I was trying to be unique, to try to get the dogs adopted. And my community really supported it. And as about 4 months in to working with dogs that I had my review. And I went in, and I'll never forget Dr. Tram's face. She just couldn't believe I was the same person. I hadn't had an appointment 2 months prior to that. So she was amazed. She couldn't believe I was the same person. She says, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because all they cared about was the amount of salt I was taking in and was I drinking. And I wasn't doing those things, but it was what was happening with me mentally and spiritually that was saving my life. It wasn't what was happening to me physically. It was finding a reason to be here that saved me. It wasn't, all of that, all the physical stuff happened because a switch went off in my mind that told me I should be here. If my mind would have stayed in that rut of you shouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here. The dogs really provided me that reason to live, as if only because it was as simple as if I weren't around, they wouldn't be around. They needed me and I needed them. And it was just a beautiful routine. It made me get up early. It made me do my meditations. It made me walk. I had to walk every day to work off all this ascites, this condition that I had with my liver and kidneys and my belly. It provided an incredible roadmap for beating liver disease. Surround yourself with 15 rescue dogs. You have to exercise them. You have to advertise them. You have to share them with people, take them to events, do all this stuff. And then Marley's Mutts just organically came out of that. I didn't even invent the name. That was just my community and the veterinary hospital I was working at. They gave me a kennel. They just said, hey, you're doing such good work. We want to give you a kennel, because I didn't have anywhere to keep the dogs. So this will be yours at our hospital, and whatever strays that come in, you can take that. We'll look at them for you free of charge. They were like incredible. I was panhandling for money at AA meetings and NA meetings. And then I started making t-shirts. The Marley's Mutts name was just the checker at the Pet Lodge, which is the pet store in town. I always had Marley with me, my Rottweiler pit bull. And she goes, you guys are really doing a great job with this. I ran into somebody in LA and they knew who you were. I go, what? We weren't even a business then. And she goes, you ought to call it Marley's Mutts, because you're out there working for the mutts. And I was like, oh shit, you're onto something. Because that's what, it's all about the mutts, man. I've never had a purebred dog in my life. They've always been like me. They've always been mutts. It just clicked, and Marley's Mutts was created. And when I went to that review 6 months later, she was just flabbergasted, because, I'm one of 0.5% of end-stage liver disease patients that regenerate cirrhotic tissue. Most people who are end stage, that's why it's called end stage. You die or you get a transplant. You don't just get better. It was very miraculous that I got better. And it's still miraculous that I've remained better, because you're subject to pancreatic cancer, to liver nodules and growths, specifically liver cancer. There's a lot of things that go wrong when you've done this to your body. And it really just fundamentally saved my life, man. It completely put me on a totally different trajectory. And the whole world of rescue just like wrapped me up and shot me off in a cannon. The complete opposite direction that I was headed, which was just a deficit to humanity. You know what I mean? And I quickly became an asset to humanity, and I became the dude who, you remember the guy who went to your high school and talked about drugs and stuff and was like still kind of spun out? I was that guy, just not spun out anymore, And I got to go to all these different schools and bring my black pit bull Rottweiler with me and talk about recovery and talk about dogs and talk about all of it, man. And like own that shit. I was and am proud that I'm an alcoholic, that I'm an addict. I don't know that I'm proud of the things I've done, but I'm proud that I can identify that. I'm proud that I can own it. I'm proud that it doesn't define me. It's not who the fuck I am anymore. It used to be. Like there was no me without my recovery, and my affliction. Now I'm just me.
How much of it was motivated by now having a purpose versus feeling compelled to serve others?
It didn't start out as a compulsion to serve other people. It was always a compulsion to serve dogs. So my Marley, Tug, and Buddy, my rescue dogs that came from the Mojave shelter, all saved my life in a daily way, like sometimes by the hour. They were there for me through everything. When I would obsess about taking my own life, I would sit there with my dog Tug and I would look at him and I'd pet him. I would talk out loud about going into the forest and shooting myself, and I was going to bring him, I don't know. He was my first love. I haven't thought about that moment in a very long time. Yeah. So, there were so many moments from the time I first got diagnosed to, after I got out of the hospital to when I relapsed, where life was on I was on the razor's edge of death, death by my own hand or death by liver failure. And my dogs stepped in at every opportunity to give me the reassurance that I needed to stick around. They were just always there in some profound way or in some, indirect way to let me know that I was loved and that I was needed. And I don't know why, but I never felt that from another person up to that point. I felt it from my dad, and I felt like I had let him down so much that he just almost didn't apply. And he was such a authority figure to me. It was less relatable. But my dogs, it just felt like my dogs and I were in it together. It just felt like we were in it together, and we beat it together. And so, when I went through that 6-month review and they said, you're not even transplant eligible. Your MELD score has dropped down so far, you're not eligible. That whole shift of starting to think about a future, starting to think about life without like death looming was incredible. It was a whole shift in mentality, a whole shift in everything where I started to think about a future. I never had thought about a future, never thought about kids or a wife or a job, any of those things, and I owed that all to my dogs. I owed every single part of that, because every time my spirituality wasn't enough, my personality wasn't enough, that I couldn't stand being here anymore. Every time I entered into that thought loop, my dogs would get me out of it. They'd do something to get me out of it. And they were like my sanity when I didn't have any, And so the real impetus of Marley's Mutts was just to give back to dogs like my dogs, was just to provide that bond that seemingly only rescue dogs can provide. I just wanted to take my dogs and other dogs that we rescued out into the world and show people like these are magical furry medicine balls, that can truly change your life if you allow them to. Every morning on my walks was a walking meditation with my dogs. Every night dealing with certain dogs' issues and whether they had a broken leg or a this or a that, or I had to mend them and tend to them. It was all the focus had been on myself and my ego and my own bullshit forever. For as long as I can remember, it was my own me. And the fundamental difference is that it was no longer about just me. It was about my dogs too. Shifting that perspective away from me and onto my dogs made all the difference in the world. And that goes back into what you were saying about feeling sorry for myself. It's much harder to feel sorry for yourself when you have to be strong for something else. The real motivation for Marley's Mutts is to just give back to the dogs that saved my life and give back to dogs that are just like the ones that saved my life.
So Marley's Mutts is now a nonprofit organization. You're getting healthier. How much longer after that did positive change come about? And more specifically, how did positive change come about? Because it's one thing to rescue dogs, start a dog rescue. it's a whole other thing to say, hey, I'm going to take dogs into a prison. So I'd love to know how this came about.
Yeah. So my purpose was very much wrapped up in serving dogs. That was always, once I found that, I found my niche. I knew it. It just feels right. Like when you try it on, it's just like, this is what I'm here to do, you know? And then a couple of things happened. One of our trainers, Lisa Porter, she very much liked the idea of training in prison, but we just couldn't make it happen. We tried for years to get into different prisons and we couldn't make it happen. And they wouldn't accept us. They didn't want to listen to us. They didn't want to talk. We had a little bit of success getting past the first, couple of doors, and then they wouldn't follow through. And then there's a gentleman named Robbie who got out of prison, and his parents, and he wanted to adopt a dog. And he spent 13 years in prison and was I don't want to say he wasn't well equipped to survive on the outside. He had just been locked up since he was a kid, jailhouse tattoos, difficulty making eye contact, having normal conversations. It was just a very different world for him. And so when they came up to visit a dog I was fostering, he greeted me at the door and was shut down completely. And then as soon as he saw that dog, they went over onto the couch and just started making out with each other. And that day, that moment where he came up and adopted Shadow changed his entire life. I mean, he started to give his testimony with me, started sharing at the mission, started working with my mom, who's now sober. So my mom went through a recovery program at the homeless center in Bakersfield. So he was doing stuff with her, doing stuff with us. He got hired as a shelter director in Oklahoma. So all of a sudden now he got this dog that is introducing him to all kinds of people. He can go out in the world and talk to folks. He doesn't have to worry about the conversation because he's got a dog there. It's just such an incredible pacifier for certain situations. A lot of situations for people when they get out of prison are difficult. And when you have a dog there, it just makes it that much easier. So linking him up with a dog changed his whole life. We ended up hiring him as our shelter director. He now has his own rescue called Strength of Shadow. You guys should check it out. Strength of Shadow Rescue. And his name's Robbie Miller. He's just an incredible dude who's done a whole lot with his life because he got that dog within the first month of getting out of prison. And he's now been able to go do a whole bunch of great in the world and inspire formerly incarcerated people and also have our community believe in him. People that look like him are usually rejected by our society, but our culture and our society in Bakersfield and Kern County has completely accepted him, because he's a formerly incarcerated dog rescuer. You see, they view it through the lens of dogs. So with that, we just knew we had to involve the prison system in dogs, in dog training, in the marriage of dogs and incarcerated individuals. And we just weren't going to take no for an answer. And finally got accepted in 2016 to California City Correctional Facility. Warden David Long took a chance on us and brought us in. Our positive change program is incredibly immersive. It is no joke, man. And it's no joke because the 10 to 15 trainers that do it fundamentally believe in it and fundamentally believe in this cause. We're not just there handing rescue dogs to incarcerated people and having fun photo ops and providing emotional support, although that's there. We're there to just wreck down racial barriers. We're there to infuse hope and opportunity and to help these guys come together in prison, help them practice how to be successful when they get out, help them practice conversations, help them practice interacting with people in the opposite race, help them become emotionally available and vulnerable. These are all things that they need to develop or would benefit developing before they're released from prison. And our program does that. It's incredible how many people not only have, graduated. I think we've graduated like 450 guys, but most of them have done the program many times. And of the 40 or so that have gotten out, more than half of them are involved in the pet space, involved in the pet industry. So they've been hired as dog trainers, as kennel technicians, as behaviorists, right out of prison. And these are predominantly violent offenders who have served more than 10 years in prison, like the worst category for recidivism. People who've served long-term sentences and are violent offenders. And we're having a ton of success just showing the world what these guys are capable of. They are not their crimes. They are not their crimes, and they're not just inmates or convicts, these terrible monikers that we apply to these dudes, these men and women and kids, which they, by the way, carry for the rest of their lives. Like if you if you had lied about something, which I'm sure you have, I have many times, and I like referred to you as a liar for the rest of your life, can you imagine how like consciously and subconsciously how that would fuck with you? Yet our entire society doesn't hesitate to call these people convicts or inmates for the rest of their life. Like how degrading and demeaning, and how are we as a culture ever supposed to get past? How are we ever supposed to accept them as not their crime, not their time, but as who they are, who they actually are? So that's like one of my favorite parts about the program is it forces the American public to look at these guys through the lens of dogs, which just naturally pacifies the whole situation. You got 80-year-old, white women who never in a million years would have opened their hearts to like a convict of color, right? Who might have been a part of a loss of life crime, right? That would have never happened. But I can't tell you how many of our followers have decided to accept formerly incarcerated individuals for who they are now, not because of the crimes they committed 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, but because of the individuals they are now, what they've done to showcase who they are. And that's the most beautiful thing about all this is giving these guys access to real hope and real opportunity, because that's what they need. That's what we need to provide them if we hope to turn around the criminal justice system as it exists.
What's the mood like day one?
Oh, the mood day one is trepidatious. A lack of trust, a general dis-ease with the situation. Is
that dogs and people?
Yeah. Well, you got to understand, like the first time we meet them, we are interviewing them. They have to write an essay. They have to interview with us. And we usually have an associate warden and a captain, sometimes a lieutenant with us while we ask them questions. So we have to gauge their interest in the program and make sure they're just not trying to get milestones, free time off. And we have to let them know like what this program's about. It's no walk in the park. You got to work outside of your race. You got to work every day. It's 13 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months. Our dogs live in the facility with them, and they're handfuls. We don't send them, Cora. They get, Chomper is who they get, because a lot of these guys, they're very talented in there. So we send them some of the worst dogs, some of the dogs that need rehabilitation the most. So yeah, in prison, the vibe is one of lack of trust, kind of period. Lack of trust between races, lack of trust between staff and incarcerated. And so that naturally carries over to us. But I think once we've gotten through I usually give a speech that's never prepared, that is just freestyling about who I am and why we're there. And sometimes our other trainers will give speeches as well. And I think by the end of day one, they usually feel pretty comfortable. And certainly by the end of the first round, after the first 3 months, we're basically a family. We are very close. And although we are very professional in how we orient ourselves, those are our family. That is our family. And we are aware of how much our participation can affect the rest of their lives. We have seen what this program can do for people and how it can set up their life when they get out of prison, and how it can really work for you and not only change your life, but that of your entire family who's been affected the entire time they've been incarcerated. It is funny, in reflecting on that, I remember we had been at California City for over a year. So we'd been at one prison for over a year. We'd gotten so good. Everything was great. Everyone loved each other. We had just had this total symbiosis. And then we started at Corcoran State Prison, which is one of the most dangerous prisons in California. And it was level 4. So level 4 Old Corcoran is bad place. And we went over there to start a program. And I remember thinking, oh shit, yeah, this is real. Whew. I forgot how intense shit is on the first day. I forgot how intense it is, because all that, I was used to the trust we'd built up in California City. I wasn't used to the response we got at Corcoran, which is, far more, uneasy. But just like what happened at Cal City, they pretty quickly, we all kind of fall in love with each other.
You mentioned some of the racial walls in prison. What are some of the changes you've seen throughout the program?
Well, the changes we've seen are just people interacting with one another. There's usually not much friendship across racial lines. So the fact that guys are training the same dog together, they are friends with one another. A very good example is there's one of the guys in our program, several swastikas tattooed on him. One of his partners is a black man, one of our mentor trainers. And they gave a video of the two of them with their arms around each other, talking about how before the program started, they not only would they not have ever interacted with one another, but they would have been at odds with each other intentionally, and how they become really good friends throughout the program. And that's what it does, is it just, when you walk into prison, whether you walk into a pod or on the yard, you feel the energy intensity. It's at 11. It is dialed up, and you can kind of feel, especially when something's about to happen, you can feel it. It's a real tangible energy that's very intense. And when the program's been going for a while, the guys just feel symbiotic. It just feels good. That's a huge testimony to the kind of racial equanimity that exists within the program. Some of the other things are, drug dealing will basically cease while we're on the yard, which is important. They support us in terms of people honoring and respecting the program. So there's, a lot of things in prison are about respect. You give us respect, we'll give you respect. And we 100% respect them. And we respect we're in their house. And if we treat them accordingly, they treat us accordingly. So I think starting the program out on one of respect is what led to such a great shift in the kind of racial dynamic. And the racial dynamic, it started out very poor. We had no Hispanic involvement in the beginning. They thought our program was potentially negative or aligned with the correctional institution for some reason. So we had no Hispanics, period, in the beginning, that's a large part of our percentage of our population. So we had to earn that. And once we earned that, then kind of the floodgates open. And we have probably more Hispanics than any other race involved in our program.
What kind of feedback do you get from, if at all, from family members of people who are incarcerated?
Oh, we get more feedback from family members than anybody. The feedback is tremendous. One of the dynamics is most of these guys have been locked up for a very long time. So their family has many cases not seen them and have nothing to be proud of them for. And all of a sudden now they're looking at them on the Positive Change Instagram page, training some crazy dog from China, on a keyboard. Whoa, wait a minute. So they may have not seen a video of their loved one in 20 years. Much less like a tangible something that's on social media. Like, that's my dad. That's my dad. So my buddy Todd Olds, he is a graduate of our program. I think he served 10 years at California City. Been in prison most of his life. He's an incredible trainer. He's working in Oregon now. Shout out to Todd Olds. And when we were in the program, I'll never ever forget it, man. He came up to me and he showed me a letter that his daughter wrote him when he was incarcerated. She was 9 years old. It had a drawing of a very mean dog and a drawing of a very nice dog. And the very mean dog was him, Daddy. And the very nice dog was Mommy's new person. And it said, "I don't want to be with you anymore, Daddy. I want to be with Mommy." And she said she didn't want anything to do with him, right? So he was devastated. Fast forward 10 years or 9 years, he gets another letter from her. He shows me this next letter. It's 9 years later. And it's her. And she's writing him saying, "I saw you on social media. I couldn't be more proud of you. I want to be a part of your life because I deserve to have you as part of my life. And can we rekindle our connection?" Similarly, the same thing happened with our buddy Saley, Koa Saley. He's been incarcerated for 22 years, hadn't talked to his family in more than a decade. And they actually came to see him, to California City, which is nowhere near where he was locked up originally. And they came out to see him, hadn't seen him in more than a decade. And there's a million stories like that where people haven't talked to their kids in a decade or 15 years. And they saw him on they get to see him on Positive Change social media, and they're writing him regularly. And they're looking forward to when they get out. A lot of the guys have out dates now. A lot of our guys would not have gotten out of prison had they not been involved in the program. Because when you go to the parole board and you've been working in a program for 4 years, saving lives and being vulnerable and giving of yourself, you've worked off a lot of your time, and it shows very well for the parole board. They understand that you're actively working to better yourself and set yourself up with a job when you get out. So yeah, that I'm really glad you reminded me of that, because that is the easiest language to understand of all this, is that these are just real people with real families that are suffering through this experience with them. People tend to think of an incarcerated person as just some guy who fucked up, who's being punished because of it. But that guy who fucked up has kids, and he has a wife, and he has a mom, and he has a brother and a sister, and cousins and grandparents and uncles, and they're all in there with him, you know, and that experience can negatively rub off on them in a variety of different ways. You know, that's the institutional part of all this. And so when they have something to be proud of and when they have something to look forward to when they get out, that they can take these skills into a profession that they can start immediately, it's a big deal, man. An incarcerated individual with nothing to lose is someone to keep his eye on, you know, whereas someone who has hope, who has a future, you know, is much less likely to be a threat.
What have you learned personally?
In
being involved,
prisons?
just being in prisons or being involved or running the program, and what have you, Zach, taken away personally from this?
Boy, I've learned so much working in prisons. It has shifted my focus from 100% dog rescue to people rescue. To, you know, what I have learned is that there are millions and millions of Americans who have been categorically judged and disenfranchised, in many cases for the rest of their life, and we don't give a shit. There are millions and millions of Americans that have been thrown away, just like me, who are just like me, you know, who are more valuable than me, who will never see the light of day, or who have lost all of their voice, lost their future, lost their hope, and for no good reason. What I have learned is that our nation has a radical propensity to throw people away because of something they did without taking into consideration the context leading up to that crime or the circumstances leading up to that crime or any nuance or variable that doesn't fit into their, you know, ideology. People want it to be cut and dry, black and white. We're good people here on the outside. Those are bad people. Let's dress them in orange and blue and lock them away and keep them away from us because those are bad people. They're not bad people. That's what I've learned the most, is that people who are incarcerated are not bad people. They are in many cases incredible people, the most empathetic people, the most creative people, the most talented people, the most driven. And we are missing out on all of that, all of it. And we might miss out on it for a lot longer unless we get our shit together, pull our heads out of our ass, and understand that those are just people that have made mistakes. Just like all of us are people that make mistakes every single day. And we have this rigid tendency to lock people out of life. We just lock them out of life for something that they may have done, may have not done. And what I've really become aware of is how much of a tragedy that is, not only for that individual, but for their entire family. That when you lock up somebody for 20 years, you're locking up their entire family. And when you don't give that person access to hope or opportunity when he gets out, you starve that entire family of hope and opportunity. And then you create more people who are going to end up committing crimes because they don't have access to hope or opportunity. And what I desperately wish to accomplish with this program is a fundamental paradigm shift within our society and our culture that views people for who they are in that moment, not for who they believe someone to be because of their past.
Where does the funding come from?
Funding for positive change has been a roller coaster ever since the beginning because it is very difficult to raise money for because it's expensive and the government doesn't want to give money to prison programs. So we raise money online. The majority of our donations come in from John Q viewer is John Q Facebook supporter, so I think our average
social media has been huge for you.
Social media has been gigantic for us. Social media has been the key to growing the program. We would not be able to grow the program without social media 100%. So I think the first 4 years, the average donation was like $12. So it's thousands of people giving $12 donations to keep this alive. Luckily, we've secured some supporters who shall remain nameless, but are very supportive. And, we've had a couple different celebrities support programs. One in particular supported our girls' juvenile program. She had taken part and just said, I believe in this. I want you guys to survive for at least another year. So, and then another helped us open up a new program at Tehachapi State Prison. So we have a lot of really wonderful people who have taken notice and are starting to help us gain some of the, just the financial comfort that we need, because it's really hard to grow a program creatively when you don't know how you're going to survive. And that's been our number one issue.
How do you move past the social perceptions of the incarcerated, or how do you get people past their sort of perceived notions of who these men are?
That's a good question. I think we get people past their perceived notions of criminals and what it means to be a criminal by posting more pictures of them with dogs. I'm telling you, man, that's the way. You have to first allow their brain to even consider the idea. People are so rigidly stuck in this idea that, convicts and inmates, like what that means, this lockup raw mentality, that it's very difficult to get them even to consider anything other than that. I can talk until I'm blue in the face about who these individuals are as I know them, and people don't really want to hear it. They really don't. But if they see an image or a video of the rehabilitation taking place, that process is for them. That they get. And now so many of our guys have gotten out and are successful in the community. A lot of our guys spend a ton of time in the rescue community. These are guys that have gotten out of prison, are professionals now, and they're serving their communities. So that's clicked with people. They see, okay, I remember following him when he was incarcerated. Now he's out. He's doing all this productive work. Maybe I fucked up by assuming he would just go back to prison, or assuming because he was a black man, for instance, that he couldn't be involved in dog training. That's one of the other incredibly beautiful thing about this is we are introducing a gigantic economy that is the pet industry, a $70 billion industry, to formerly incarcerated individuals who desperately need an industry that will support them. So that's what we've found is that, black men, black women, really people of color in general, have not been very involved in the rescue genre, in the pet industry in general. They haven't been. And this is offering a door and an entrance into the pet industry for a tremendous amount of incarcerated individuals of color, and can continue to do so at a orders of magnitude greater. I mean, we could have this program in every single city there is a prison, period. In hundreds of cities, we could have this if we had the right support, and imagine how many lives that would change. I mean, think about how many dogs were adopted during COVID. It was like 500,000. 500,000 shelter dogs got adopted. How many of those are going to need training? There's just simply not enough trainers. It's the number one position within the pet space. The number one profession within this industry that is needed right now is behaviorist. And we're producing behaviorists within our program. So it is a absolute win-win-win in every possible category.
Well, how can the people listening help you push the program forward?
People can help in a lot of ways. If you just want the general information, they can go to marleysmutts.org/positive change. You can Google positive change program and a whole bunch of stuff. Articles will come up. The best place to donate is marleysmutts.org. Marley's Mutts is the parent organization of Positive Change Program. You can get involved in a lot of ways. Support us on social media, share our stuff. Consider hiring a formerly incarcerated individual. Consider writing to one. You can write to anybody who's incarcerated. The inmate locator service is free. It's on any CDCR website. If you care about disenfranchised people, if you care about like wrongs being righted in this world, there is no more disenfranchised group of individuals than formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated, especially people of color. They have virtually no access to hope or opportunity. They do not have access to the American dream. The American dream that we all take for granted has been shut to them. And that is a national tragedy and a travesty that we are only going to dig ourselves a deeper hole with unless we act now and kind of pull our heads out of the sand and really reevaluate who these individuals are and why.
How much of the success of Marley's Mutts and Positive Change has been you following your intuition as opposed to having a plan?
Oh, that's a very good question too. I have had no plan with Marley's Mutts or Positive Change. So much of this has just been following intuition, 100%. I think that's also has been a very fun part of this, but a very scary part of this. It's pretty spontaneous and reactive, for better or for worse. But I'm pulled to the dogs because I relate to them. I relate to throwaway dogs. I felt like a throwaway person. I relate to throwaway people because I felt like a throwaway person. I felt my worth at 0 regardless of whatever skills or talents I may have, I thought I was the most worthless human being on the planet. And I know there's a lot of people incarcerated that feel the same way. If not worthless, close to it. And I found a way out of that mindset, and my community embraced me. And if they can embrace me and all the things I've been through and who I am, then they can embrace any one of those individuals. True humanity and true compassion and empathy is empathy when it's hard, empathy when it's difficult, empathy with your enemies, empathy for your enemies, empathy for your competition. You have to think that way. And where my intuition constantly steers me is to try and give a voice to those who have been voiceless or cast aside and don't deserve to be so.
How do you define success?
My dad would say that success can be defined as when you have achieved the love of children and the respect of intelligent men. But I have a different one. I'm not there yet. That's why this is hard to answer. I don't believe I am successful. So I have 2 kids, I have a wife, I'm living in my purpose, but I do not believe I'm successful because at the end of the day, I still don't look at myself with a smile on my face. So it's hard for me to answer that because I'm not there yet. So I will be a success when at the end of the day, I can look at myself with a smile on my face.
How do you define failure?
I would define failure as failing at something without learning from it. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to that end. Can you name a failure that ultimately set you up for success?
Drinking myself into liver failure. Yeah, I mean, I failed at life, man. I failed at like every avenue of life, and it put me into a position that was as low as you could possibly get. And from that incredibly low point, a lot of these creative ideas and a lot of this purpose and productivity was created,
A lot of conversations I've had lately have been about happiness and this concept of happiness and how happiness isn't really a destination. It's more a byproduct of action. And oftentimes that action is tied to meaning. And I'm curious if that's been your experience or how you define happiness.
For me, happiness is very codependent. I feel the happiest when the people I care about are happy and when they are being served. So yeah, I mean, I have tried the typical ways of finding happiness by like feeding yourself, feeding you. I thought that's what would bring me happiness. And I still have delusions that will bring me happiness. But the happiest I have ever been is on level 4 Old Corcoran Yard, leaving after a lockdown. Like probably one of the scariest places you could ever be. But I was on with all the rest of my team on absolute cloud 9 because we had just done 4 hours of work that bettered the lives of 30 individuals and 10 dogs that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. That is the highest I ever get is when I am inside of prison working with those individuals plugged into my purpose. That is the happiest I've ever been. My wife always tells me, honey, am I allowed to tell you to go to prison when you're being an asshole? Like, can I tell you to just leave to go somewhere and be with your people? Because, yeah, I mean, that is, it might even be the only time other than when I'm playing with my kids that I truly am happy, which sounds weird to say out loud.
What would you say to 18-year-old Zach?
Oh, man, you're going to make me cry again. I would tell 18-year-old me that I love you and you are enough. And I know that sounds like my therapist told me to say that. She would probably be proud. But that's it, man. That is what I constantly think about. It's just the overall lack of love I had for myself when I was younger. Like this, the complete lack of appreciation or of acceptance. I just never even remotely accepted myself.
How would you describe what you do for a living?
I usually describe myself as a dog rescuer and prison educator. But really, if I had to rewrite it on my business card, I would probably say my job is to provide hope and access to opportunity for powerless people and pets. That's a good one, actually. We should write that down.
Zach Skow, thank you for speaking with me.
Dude, thank you, man. That was fantastic.
The Days Between is a production of Noah Abrams Studio. Story editing by Andrew Henry. Mixing and mastering by Todd Stapera and Reference Recording. Website design by John Fisher. Theme music is by Evo. The Days Between can be found online at www.thedaysbetweenpodcast.com and on Instagram at The Days Between Podcast. My name is Noah Abrams. Thanks for listening.